Hello, and welcome to another edition of Close Mode, the enterprise sales show, where I get to interview mostly fun and mostly smart people, and really smart people. So today, one of those really smart people is Thomas Gavaghan, VP of Global Pre-Sales at Kyriba. Thomas, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you so much, Brian. Nice to be here.
And I understand you're looking out the window at 6 inches of snow.
Yeah, it's a rare occurrence for us these days, a couple years, but learning to cope with it. Schools are shut down, trash isn't getting collected. It's almost apocalyptic, but yeah, not bad.
Awesome. Um, we had I really enjoyed our sort of pre-chat as we were getting ready for this, and I learned a lot about pre-sales, and I've never been fortunate enough to have professionals like your team in my life, and I would love to have had them. But in our discussion, I learned that you have a real passion for discovery. So this is what we're going to talk about today. And you said something. I was going back through my notes. You said that people have an aversion to discovery and jump right to the demo. That was curious about that. I mean, what do you think that aversion is?
Yeah, I obviously believe in that aversion and cope with it and try to manage around it on a daily basis. Working in pre-sales and working in tandem with the sales group, discovery is the foundation of success, not just for the sales success, but like the customer success if done right. I think the aversion is just, trying to cope and adapt to the buyer behavior of immediate like gratification or immediate need to receive something, right? So often you get in situations where a buyer just goes, "Well, I just want to see it. I just want to see your product. I just want to," and it's really challenging to kind of push back on that. And so a lot of times you just capitulate to that demand, but it's doing yourself a disservice because why am I showing this to you? What am I trying to show you? That's the challenge, I think. So I think it's just that immediate, like, the customer wants to see something, but actually maybe that's not in their best interest.
Yeah. No, that's interesting because I was going to ask you that. Like, why do you think they jumped to demo? And you already answered that question for me. So this is interesting to me because I know lots of people that are frustrated with the discovery their sales teams are doing, and there's a lot of there's spin selling, there's medic, and I've talked to lots of organizations who have invested in those. But at the same time, many people are still frustrated with discovery, the quality of discovery. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, and I know I've been on the sidelines of those philosophical debates, those people who have really grown up in certain spin methodologies or medic or even, med pick I have seen. I am somebody who's like, you know, omni philosophical in a way. Like I don't subscribe to one or the other. I think all of them have their different, benefits to them. But I think the frustration is to your point, like the quality of the discovery, because so often the discovery sometimes is so superficial. It's like fact gathering without, going a layer deeper and trying to find, the underlying root cause issues or the impact of the what you're actually trying to uncover. And I think when that's what causes frustration in a sales cycle between the players within the sales team, the sales, the pre-sales, if you have value engineering and so on, because one group is expecting maybe a layer deeper and we're not getting that, and it's remaining at a superficial level. And I think that's where some of that frustration occurs, and then that sometimes goes back into the buyer as well, because they go, well, we already told you this, or you should already know this. And I think that's also part of the problem.
What do you see in your business? What are sort of the bad results of poor discovery or the bad impact?
So for for others that are listening, perhaps that don't have that experience with pre-sales, our organization are typically at a high level within pre-sales. You're responsible for being the, solution advisors, the consultants, the experts in the subject matter and the application that you're ultimately, selling. And it's very, especially with, bigger technologies and in nuanced areas, it leads to poor demonstration. And if poor demonstration leads to the buyer's poor interpretation of what your solution can offer. And it's rooted in incorrect or incomplete discovery, quite honestly. You need to really, understand the pain of a patient before you administer surgery or or medication, right? You just don't throw that out there. And effectively, without discovery of identifying what's going on with the patient, you're just giving a patient pills, or you're cutting them open and giving them a surgery, and that's not normal.
I love that analogy, metaphor, whatever that is. But because I was going to ask you about the impact of proper discovery, but you just got me thinking about that. Uh, I think sometimes customers have already diagnosed their own problems and they've already prescribed their own solution, and oftentimes that's not done well. And if we react to that, I think that's kind of your point. Like that's not goodness.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think, you can even relate it to the consumer buyer behavior that you and I would experience when we think we might know the TV that we want, or whatever it is that we're in the market for. And effectively, like, if we're working with a good company, or a good, seller, they should be helping us and guiding us to what we actually might need. Obviously, we are in a world where the buyers need to be enabled, and they are, whether you're buying a TV or whether you're buying $1 million piece of software, you're doing a lot of that research and fact finding on your own. But it doesn't mean that probably controversial, but maybe the buyer isn't always right, right? And you do have to kind of help guide them to what makes most sense and most effective for what they ultimately need.
Yeah, no, I don't think it should be controversial. We're in the business of what we do, and yeah, we should have better insights than they do for sure. I wonder, the other thing that occurred to me, as we talked about discovery is, like, do you think it's shifted, like pre and post COVID, is like the whole selling world is shifted, and then we have the kind of right now where we're at in the market. Is there a more modern approach to discovery, since as opposed to how we all think about it?
Yeah, I definitely think that, well, COVID's changed a lot in everything, and also in sales. I think, you know, because of how, when COVID first started, like companies, like my own, right? You kind of had this moment of, can we run this in a remote world? And now I've been remote for 10 years in my operation, and before the pandemic, and what we do, it doesn't necessarily need to be in person. That said, we sell in person and we discover in person a lot. And obviously with COVID, that opportunity goes away. I before COVID, even, I believe that, not, discovery. I think sometimes, and I think that you might have, this might tie into the prior question that was asked, like, why are people averse to it? Like, sometimes people think discovery is open heart surgery. No, like, certain, like, good discovery can occur in 30 minutes, can occur in 1 hour. You don't need to have a day long session. And I think there's that, maybe that mental expectation that people think about when it comes to discovery. So that said, you don't, I would, even before COVID, be against doing on-site, in-person discovery, unless it was for a very, very complex, customer need, unless it was for a very, very strategic type customer. Discovery can be done in an effective way in a remote setting. And so COVID just proved that, I think, and showed that that can occur. And obviously that impacts your CAC and your overall cost and your margins of what you're ultimately doing. So you're not flying people to go do, discovery sessions.
Yeah, yeah. So and this might sound kind of basic, but what I learned in marketing research class is you always start with the end in mind, and then you go design the instrument, right? And I see a lot of people that go right to the instrument, and it's like, wait, what the hell do we want to know? What are we trying to get after? And this is the part that might sound basic. I mean, what do you think is sort of best in class? Ultimately, what are we trying to get at with discovery?
Yeah, I mean, your analogy is something that translates very well in the pre-sales, by the way. We always say, show the last thing first, right? You always kind of start with the end result, and then you kind of demo the pieces behind it. And so if you work your way backwards, again, I think discovery, when you look at it, it isn't for the success of a sale, of getting a customer on board. It's about the success of then the customer, because just because we discovered the information to align a solution and sell that solution, that discovery and that information is then going into implementing for that customer and getting them in using whatever it is that they're supposed to be using, and getting the success of the and the value out of whatever they're ultimately buying. So I think you have to start at that level. What is the information that we would require in order to implement and have a customer successful? And then you kind of not peel back the layers, you add in the layers that are needed to go forward into the into the sale. You can't start the conversation at that level, right? But we know where we need to get to. And there is ways in which you can do that from a superficial, then you kind of go into more of the underlying pains and implications of what the information is that you're finding in order to position the solution, but also at the same time knowing how you would actually go about implementing and getting the customer, value out of what you're ultimately selling them.
It's interesting because that does lead into my next question. One of my frustration with discovery is, well, and it's why I was kind of asking you about modern approaches, because old school is like, hey, what's keeping you awake at night? What are your KPIs for the year? And so now what you have is a customer telling you what they already know that has zero value for them. But do you think there's a way to add value to the customers through discovery, and if so, how?
Yeah, I definitely think so. On the modern discovery techniques, I think, I just shared where we talked about buyer enablement is huge, right? Making sure the buyer has the resources they need to be informed, and that's all part of marketing and pre-sales as well. But there's you know advanced ways that you can also do it such that you're not just giving information out, that you're actually getting information back. So automating in some way the fact gathering stage of the discovery, to me, is like a perfect world scenario, so that you're alleviating that part of the discovery. You're automating that. You're not making that so laborious between human to human. You can do that between human and machine, and then the human on the other side can interpret and make and make sense of that. So I think there is that modern element that is beneficial, right? That you kind of start off and it kind of ease into the discovery. So there again, it doesn't become such an arduous task of just show me the demo. Shut up and demo is something we oftentimes say, because that's almost the feeling that you get. And we're not there yet though, right? And if we can get the buyer comfortable with opening up a little bit and conversing and interacting, then the demo itself, right, the sales, the pitch, it becomes more tailored, it becomes more pointed, and it obviously introduces the value that you can bring, not just the what that you bring from a product perspective.
Yeah, and maybe that's where the shut up and demo thing comes from, because it's like, I'm not going to answer all these questions that have no value to me. I already know all these things I'm telling you. So, and I wonder, it leads me into, like, I've been seeing more about guided discovery versus open ended. Are you at all familiar, and how do you feel guided discovery is different from the traditional open ended?
Yeah, it's definitely an evolution, and there's different names that are used in the industry, I think, for what that is, and certainly something that I have employed and we have had success with. It depends on the buyer behavior and attitude. It starts there. Some buyers are very willing to sit on the chaise lounge and tell you all of their problems, and isn't that a dream scenario? And they don't expect anything in return to start. And in those situations, you capitalize on it. You obviously take advantage of it, but we also know that the buyers are apprehensive. They don't want, they don't want to talk to salespeople. They don't want to be sold to. They know what they know, and they think they know what they need. And in those situations, you give and get, and there's different names that you ultimately employ for that. But there is a situation where it isn't shut up and demo, but it is show a little bit and get the discovery as you go through it. You're not going at a deep, deep level. You're providing a little bit of vision to the buyer in terms of what the application or software can do. They're getting an idea of what the value can bring, and it opens up and it kind of calms the situation down. So they go, you can ask those probing questions, not just like, do you like this? Is this interesting to you? Those are terrible discovery questions. It allows you to go, this is how our customers are typically using this part of our software. Can you explain to me how you go about that in your daily activity? And in doing so, it opens up that discovery, and then you find they start getting more comfortable with you. They start opening up. They then start settling into the chaise lounge, and then eventually they're just flat out, and then telling you all of their life's problems, and you have them where you need them, so that you can symbiotically work together on finding the right solution.
Yeah, that's I love this idea, that I fundamentally agree with. That it's almost this give get. It's an information exchange, and I think there's some good human research behind that, that people are much more likely to respond in kind when you're sharing. And yeah, I don't hear enough about that with as part of the official discovery process is how do you grease the skids a little bit by enabling that information exchange by giving some data up? I think that's yeah, I think that the give gets you talked about is pretty powerful. The other thing that you said too, because I'm searching for ways like to make discovery better, and I think that's one that you just talked about. And the other one, which there's more research out there that shows customers love when best practice is shared, and that's kind of I heard you like couching discovery in terms of that. This is what we've seen elsewhere. Is that kind of how you're using that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you can't make things overly robotic. It's part art and part science. And in that give and get, it's not just, from the give side, and I'm talking about from the seller's perspective, the give, it's not just here's this screen, do you like it? Here's this cool graph, do you like that? It's the image that you're producing has to have that story behind it. And just saying those words of, we traditionally see our customers doing this. We are able to help our customers save time here. We are able to introduce vision where they didn't, or insights where they didn't have it there. Then and that gives the customer the ability, and what we call that vision, that chasm that they have to cross over of, oh, I didn't know that existed. I didn't know that world even was there. And then in doing so, that gives you the ability, the openness to say, tell me what you do, share with me. And you, in some situations, like perfect world, they'll say, let me see, can I take the screen? I'll show you my worksheet, I'll show you my Excel file, whatever. And then there you just have them, you're just now working together, and you're talking the same language, and learning what you need to learn about them, so that you can come back and actually do a real demonstration at that point, a real pitch that's tailored to what their challenges are. You're using the words they use, right? Little things like that go such a long way in order to relate to your buyer.
I mean, I do a ton of discovery myself, and one of the things that I love when I feel like we're doing it well is when the customer says, "Wow, that's a great question." And I think that we're not going to get that when we're like, "Hey, what's keeping you awake at night? Or do you like this, this widget?" But wow, that's a great question. I feel like discovery can be a kind of an equity building, a value building exercise if done properly.
It can, but the thing I think, that is really important, and one of the things I always preach, is that we all do discovery. I think depending upon, your sales organization and your approach, there's different players that are in play through that evolution. You might have, business development teams, you might have sales, then you have pre-sales, you might have value engineering teams, and anybody who's touching that customer is responsible for discovery. If it's in, sometimes it might be cultural, but it might be like, oh, that is the team that does discovery. That's not right. It's not fair to the customer. It's also not fair internally to the sales team, because we, collectively need to find certain information. And we're certainly, and what I like to say is, there's different levels of qualification. Like, you're qualified to ask these levels of questions, or these depths of questions. And working together, you can kind of get that clearer picture, not just of like the needs and wants and pains, but political landscape, right? Buying process, procurement activities that they do, prior experiences that they've had in doing, in buying any sort of, in going through a buying process. These are things that also are super, super valuable in order to have success in landing a customer, that are sometimes often, ignored. So, it's not this, oh, it's discovery isn't a stage either, right? Discovery is constant from the first point of interaction all the way through to them becoming a customer and implementing your product. You're constantly discovering, and you can't just look at it as a single point in time, and you can't just look at it as a person or a team that's solely responsible for it. It's not fair to the customer.
And I wonder, I have a couple of final questions for you, and one has to do with another one of those things that might sound pedantic, but it's back to the issue of I'm frustrated with the quality of discovery. It's recording the answers. Like, how much time do you spend on coaching the reps on the record? I mean, do they actually record because the answers, or are they writing them? Because for me, some of the best discovery are quotes you get from people to say, okay, I talked to an SVP of finance, and here's the actual word. So how do you go about capturing the data that comes out of discovery?
I think it's a constant pursuit of perfection that I don't know. I have yet in my circle to hear anybody say we have perfected that. it is the, you're just chasing that perfection of it. And it's super super important. I think first, kind of start at the end. Where should it live? Should live in your CRM tool, right? Ultimately, like, your CRM tool should be the holder of all that information, because again, discovery didn't happen that one time and you go back to it. No, it happens at each interaction. So your CRM tool tracks the activity that you have with your buyer, and you have to formalize how you're collecting the information, so that anybody who's involved currently, or like in my level, if I'm pulled into an opportunity that's in flight, I can quickly gain the information I need without having to interrogate 15 different people that are in the sales process to say, what did you hear? And what is this? And what does that guy do? And how does this work? And so having that in one place is absolutely critical. Obviously, then formalizing what is it that you need, the information you need to collect. What is it? Is it a form? Is it a document? I don't know. It can be different depending upon actually what you do. But there's such a market now, as you obviously know, with what you're doing, of technology to enable this, right? Being able to use technology, artificial intelligence you know, to gather the information, because there's so much that's said, and human might miss what's said, right? Maybe because I like to say it's like speaking another language. I speak a little bit of French to get by myself, but I can't listen to the entire sentence. So there's certain things that I might miss, and a salesperson might not truly understand the depth of perhaps what I know from a subject matter expertise. So they missed out on that really important tidbit because they didn't understand it. So if AI can be used to gather the information, pull it out, maybe I'm not even in the room, but I can be in that room retroactively and hear or see what was said because the AI might have pulled that out and told me.
Yeah, and that really is the basis for my question. We in a prior life, I did a lot of negotiation deal coaching, and we would often say to the deal teams that we were coaching, "All right, you ask the questions, you record the answers, or two other people are recording answers." And it was always fascinating to me in the post debriefs to go, "Oh wow, I missed that. I totally missed that." Like someone will bring it up in their notes, and it's such. I think when we think about discovery, we think about the outgoing words and don't spend enough time on how are we collecting those words and analyzing them. So the final question I have for you is, so like back to the notion that a lot of people are frustrated with discovery that I talk to. How do you operationalize it? I mean, it's, if you say, okay, here's what great looks like, short of telling people, your job depends on this. You either do discovery or you're gone. Have you found any effective ways to increase discovery short of just slam dunking it?
Yeah, it's again, I've yet to hear anybody say we've absolutely perfected it, copy what we do, and this is you can't make a cookie cutter. It has to align to your sales methodologies, right? What is it your sales processes look like? Are you outbound? Are you inbound type selling? Are you both? And in that, identify the opportunities and stages of the discovery and what is occurring. So relating to like an outbound sales methodology where you're actively out in the market positioning your product, you have a BD, you have aggressive marketing, you have business development that is occurring. Perhaps there's discovery that occurs there as the interest grows, and the come into that funnel, the sales get involved, right? Perhaps then there's discovery there. Then as it gets deeper, pre-sales might get involved, and value engineers might get involved, and there's the discovery there as well. The analogy I always use is like going to a doctor's office. When you go to a doctor's office, you don't just immediately walk in the room and go to the back and talk to a doctor. You at least talk to two different people before you go there, right? You're talking to the person in the front desk who's taking in your information of who you are, why you're there, what you're in for. Then you go to a nurse who's going to take your vital information of your height, your weight, your blood pressure, things like that. Then you're going to go and eventually, and go and talk to the doctor. And there, that is discovery, right? And if you operate that way, where you have the information being passed along, then you're able to then open up the opportunity for the doctor to assess the situation and then prescribe what needs to be done. The opposite of that is if I call into my cable provider who won't be named, and I have a problem, I might talk to four people and I have to tell them for the same thing four times, right? It's awful discovery, and that you don't want your buyer going through that experience. So you have to operationalize it. And you have to identify and again qualify yourself. Hey, I am your sales rep. I am not the deep subject matter expert, but I am here to understand a little bit more about your buying process, your experience with solutions like ours. Do you have a procurement process? Who do you report to? Who would be involved that we need to include? Those are great discovery questions that are absolutely required. And if you qualify yourself and they start going too deep into their pains and you're uncomfortable, you have the ability to say, hey, these are awesome things. Let's table that because I want to bring in our solution consultant. If you don't do that and you pretend like you understand French, like I might do sometimes, you're just sitting there nodding your head and you're missing all the great context. So when they come back and the person that can understand it says, "Tell me more," you frustrated the buyer, just like my cable company has frustrated me. And the other thing as well is that is really hard, I think, to manage, but it's really important. Is there's other things about discovery that are important: tone, attitude, things like that, the intangibles, like getting on a call without knowing that perhaps somebody's really dry, that they're very not open, right? If I get on, I go, this person's just a mean person, perhaps, like they're just not cooperative. But if they were that way from the first conversation and I know that, then at least I'm prepared to address that and meet that energy and not be turned off because the person's just dismissive or something like that. So I think that's also something that's sometimes not appreciated. And it's so simple. Like that's really simple to discover.
No, this has been really cool. I love this subject, and a few things that jumped out. I love the idea of your discovery being tied to customer success. Just really dialing that in, and then also the idea of trading information. That we should be ready if we want to loosen up the other side. We should be able to share some data. And I think the holy grail you kind of ended with. I love this medical analogy that it's sort of systematic data capture, right, and then systematically shared down the line. And that for me is the perfect way to cap this off, because I think for those of us as sales professionals, that's the holy grail. Like we need that systematic data capture and sharing along the way so we can diagnose and prescribe properly. So yeah, I think that's a great North Star for those of us who do this.
Yeah, and any cable providers that are perhaps listening to the podcast, a good way to help your customers, by the way.
Yeah, and I share that frustration. And by the way, it always blows me away. There's so much good technology out there to capture. I mean, no one even has to write anything down. Why they still can't do that is beyond me. And by the way, there are some medical facilities that are similar, where you're kind of repeating your data over and over again. But you are right. When it's done properly, that's how we should think of discovery, the same way we're diagnosing a medical issue. So that's really cool. I really appreciate your time, and hope that Snowmageddon doesn't doesn't get you in and keep you locked inside all weekend.
I think we'll
All
survive.
right, man. Thank you. I enjoyed this.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Thank you, Brian. Yeah, absolutely. Anytime. Good talking to you.